Here's the complete script with the strongest, most addictive hook integrated at the top. This hook delivers immediate irony, high stakes, and tension in just 4 punchy lines. It captures the core failure that drives the entire story, then flows perfectly into your atmospheric opening. Final script with killer hook. High above the Pacific in early 1942, American bombers dropped precision bombs with textbook perfection. Every single one missed. Japanese destroyers barely bothered to turn. The most advanced air doctrine in the world had become irrelevant against ships that refused to stand still. At dawn, the Pacific looked calm. Too calm. A flat gray surface stretching to the horizon, broken only by the white scars of shipwakes cutting through it. From above, everything seemed slow, predictable, controlled. That illusion was about to collapse. High over the ocean, American bombers flew in perfect formation. Engines steady. Bomb bay doors sealed. Crews trained, confident, following doctrine written in classrooms thousands of miles away. According to that doctrine, this was how modern war worked. You climbed high, stayed safe, and let physics do the killing. Gravity was supposed to be your weapon. Precision was supposed to be your shield. Below them, Japanese destroyers raced across open water. Fast, lean, disciplined. Their crews had learned something painful but valuable. Bombs take time to fall. And time, at sea, belongs to the ship. When the first bomber doors opened, Japanese officers did not panic. They glanced upward, started counting, and turned their ships just enough. Not dramatic turns. Small ones. Calm ones. The bombs splashed into empty ocean, sending tall white columns into the air. Impressive. Useless. This wasn't a one-time failure. It happened again, and again, and again. By early 1942, American aircrews were doing everything right and achieving nothing. The famous bombsight worked beautifully against factories and rail yards. Against moving warships, it failed so consistently that destroyer captains began to treat high-altitude bombers as background noise. Dangerous, yes. Decisive, no. This mattered more than most people realize. Because those destroyers weren't just ships. They were lifelines. Every night, fast convoys delivered food, ammunition, vehicles, and reinforcements to Japanese island garrisons. Without those supplies, jungle armies would starve. With them, they could fight forever. And American air power could not stop them. Crews returned to base exhausted, angry, humiliated. Bomb racks empty. Fuel low. Maintenance teams cannibalizing aircraft just to keep others flying. Morale didn't crack all at once. It leaked away slowly, mission after mission, as the same pattern repeated. The problem wasn't courage. It wasn't training. It wasn't technology failing to work as designed. The problem was time. From 20,000 feet, a bomb took nearly a full minute to reach the sea. In that minute, a destroyer at full speed could move far enough to turn a perfect calculation into a meaningless guess. The higher the bomber, the more freedom the target had. The system gave the enemy the initiative, and everyone involved knew it. Then a different kind of commander arrived. General George Kenney didn't bring new equations or better manuals. He brought doubt. He looked at the reports and didn't ask how to improve bombing accuracy. He asked something more dangerous. How do you take time away from the enemy? The answer was obvious and terrifying. You get closer. Closer meant lower. Lower meant flying directly into every gun on the ship. It meant abandoning the safety of altitude and replacing calculation with nerve. According to every chart and projection, it meant unacceptable losses. But the alternative was worse. Losing slowly. Watching supplies flow freely while doing nothing about it. Kenney understood something most doctrines avoid admitting. A perfect method that fails in reality is still a failure. Low-level attacks began experimentally. Bombers skimmed the water, skipping bombs across the surface like stones. Results improved, but problems remained. Bombs were still bombs. They still depended on timing, angles, and luck. Someone asked the question nobody was supposed to ask. What if the airplane didn't drop anything at all? Machine guns were already there. They rattled decks and scared crews but rarely stopped ships. To truly disable a destroyer, you had to reach inside it. Boilers, engines, steering gear. You needed penetration. You needed artillery. The weapon already existed. The Army's 75mm field gun. On paper, the idea was absurd. The gun weighed nearly 1,000 pounds. Its recoil was measured in tons. On land, it buried itself into earth. In tanks, it relied on massive steel frames to survive each shot. An aircraft had none of that. Just thin aluminum, rivets, and lift. When engineers ran the numbers, the conclusion was immediate and unanimous. Fire the gun, and the airplane would tear itself apart. The nose would fail. The aircraft would stall. The pilot might lose consciousness or worse. This wasn't fear. It was math. The phrase that circulated quietly wasn't risky. It was pilot suicide. And yet, the problem refused to go away. Japanese ships were unloading troops in daylight. Barges fed entire garrisons. Every day this continued, the strategic position worsened. Kenney didn't argue with the engineers. He accepted their calculations. Then he accepted the consequences. Because war doesn't ask if something is safe. It asks if it is necessary. The modifications didn't happen in clean factories. They happened in hot, improvised hangars in Australia and New Guinea. The bomber's glass nose was cut off completely. Not redesigned. Removed. In its place went a blunt steel mount for the cannon. The aircraft became nose-heavy. Mechanics bolted lead into the tail to keep it from tipping forward. Inside, stations disappeared. The bombardier's role vanished. His job no longer existed. A new crewman took his place. The man who would load 15-pound artillery shells by hand while flying at combat speed, at wave height, under fire. Nothing about this made the airplane better on paper. It became heavier, slower, harder to control. Test pilots described it as flying a truck with wings. When the first live-fire test approached, nobody was confident. The recoil system was the only thing standing between the pilot and disaster. The aircraft lined up on a remote target. Engines steady. The cockpit went silent. This was the moment the engineers expected to end everything. The trigger was pulled. The aircraft shuddered violently. Smoke filled the nose. The sensation felt like hitting a solid wall in midair. Then something unexpected happened. The plane kept flying. The wings held. The structure absorbed the shock. The shell hit exactly where the pilot aimed. The math hadn't been wrong. Reality had just been Messier. In that instant, the idea crossed a line. It was no longer theoretical. It was real. And once a weapon proves it can survive being fired, the only question left is what it can do to the enemy. That answer would come soon. Not from high altitude. Not from safety. But from 50 feet above open water. And when it came, it would change how naval war was fought forever. The first real test did not arrive with ceremony. There were no speeches, no headlines, no confidence that this would work again. Just low clouds, broken visibility, and a Japanese convoy moving through open water as it had done dozens of times before. From the deck of the lead destroyer, the morning looked ordinary. Gray sea. Light chop. Escorts in position. Transports steady behind them. The kind of day naval officers trusted. The kind of day doctrine said favored the ship. Then the aircraft appeared. Not high. Not distant. They came out of the clouds already low, engines loud, silhouettes wrong. Medium bombers were not supposed to be there. Not at wave height. Not charging straight in. The destroyer's bridge erupted into motion. Orders shouted. Guns elevated. Tracers reached upward, tearing into the air. From the Japanese perspective, this looked like madness. A bomber flying directly into naval gunfire without climbing, without turning away, without releasing torpedoes. The captain ordered the standard response. Turn toward the threat. Present the narrowest possible target. Break the attack run. That decision had saved ships before. This time, it sealed their fate. Inside the American aircraft, the pilot's world collapsed into a single sight mounted on the dashboard. No bomb computer. No corrections. To aim the gun, he had to aim the entire airplane. The machine guns fired first. Heavy bursts raked the destroyer's bow and bridge, smashing rangefinders, forcing exposed gunners down. The wall of fire weakened just long enough. The aircraft closed fast. At this distance, the destroyer filled the windshield. Steel plates, spray exploding along the hull, details too sharp to ignore. The loader forced the shell into the breach, muscles burning against gravity and vibration. The signal came. The pilot made a small adjustment, lifting the nose just enough to aim below the forward turret, just above the waterline. Where boilers lived. Where power became vulnerability. He fired. The recoil slammed through the aircraft like a collision. Smoke filled the cockpit. For a heartbeat, the plane seemed to hesitate in midair. Then the shell hit. It punched through steel plating and detonated inside the destroyer. Steam erupted violently. The ship lurched. Power failed instantly. The white wake behind it thinned, then vanished. A warship built to outrun danger was suddenly motionless. The bomber screamed overhead, so close that crewmen could see chaos on the deck below. As the pilot pulled away, the loader was already moving again. Another shell. No pause. No relief. The second pass came faster. This time, the destroyer's fire was desperate, less controlled. The machine guns swept the deck again. The cannon roared. The explosion tore through the aft section. Secondary blasts followed. Fuel. Ammunition. Stored charges. The destroyer began to settle, its fate decided in seconds. The rest of the convoy broke formation. Ships scattered. But the rules had already changed. Other aircraft dropped even lower. Skip bombs bounced across the surface and slammed into hulls at point-blank range. Transports burned. Escorts crippled. The sea turned black with oil and smoke. This was not elegance. It was precision applied without mercy. When the surviving aircraft turned for home, radios filled with disbelief. Not celebration. Release. The kind that comes after surviving something that should have killed you. Behind them, the ocean marked the end of an assumption that had ruled naval warfare for decades. The impact was immediate. Japanese commanders noticed the pattern almost at once. Daylight movement became dangerous. Convoys delayed departures. Routes shifted closer to shore. Ships waited for night before moving. Every change carried a cost. Night operations increased accidents. Longer routes burned fuel. Slower movement meant fewer supplies delivered. In jungle warfare, logistics decide everything. Food, ammunition, fuel. Without them, even disciplined forces wither. The cannon did not just sink ships. It forced decisions. And decisions created friction. This became unmistakably clear during a major reinforcement attempt later that year. A large Japanese convoy moved to resupply and reinforce positions near New Guinea. It relied on speed, escort strength, and the belief that air attack could be managed. It was wrong. Aircraft attacked at wave height, suppressing defenses with gunfire before bombs and cannon fire struck. Transports were torn open. Escorts disabled. The convoy was annihilated in a single engagement. Thousands of troops were lost before they ever reached land. After that, something fundamental shifted. Japanese planners could no longer assume that fast ships were safe by day. The ocean was no longer a shield. Air power could reach into steel hulls and break them open immediately. From the Allied perspective, this unlocked a new form of pressure. Air power was no longer just about destruction. It became denial. Deny movement. Deny resupply. Deny choice. The weapon was not perfect. Losses still happened. Low-level attacks left no margin for error. One lucky hit could erase an aircraft instantly. But effectiveness does not require perfection. It requires leverage. And this weapon provided it at exactly the right moment. By 1943, production expanded. Gunship variants entered service. Crews trained specifically for maritime strike. Tactics refined. Suppression first. Precision second. Survival always uncertain. The Pacific War began to change shape. Islands once considered viable became liabilities. Supply lines frayed. Garrisons weakened before ground forces ever arrived. Eventually, technology moved on. Rockets replaced the cannon. Lighter. Faster. Fired in salvos. They required less exposure and less physical strain on crews. The big gun faded quietly from frontline service. But it did not disappear. Years later, the idea returned in a different form. Transport aircraft orbiting targets while firing heavy guns sideways. Larger calibers. Better systems. The same core concept. The idea that had once been called suicide had simply been waiting for technology to catch up. So were the engineers wrong? No. Their calculations were correct. Their warnings were grounded in reality. They were doing exactly what responsible experts are meant to do. But war forces a different question. Not whether something is safe, but whether the cost of not doing it is worse. General Kenney did not ignore science. He weighed outcomes. Aircraft losses versus a campaign slowly bleeding to death. Between restraint and necessity, he chose necessity. And young crews climbed into aluminum aircraft knowing the trigger might kill them before the enemy ever could. That is the uncomfortable truth at the center of this story. World War II was not won by perfect ideas. It was won by people willing to act when perfection failed. And that lesson, more than the cannon itself, is what truly changed the war.